Do you hate being seen to be experiencing anxiety? If so, this video is for you and you are in the right place. I work with so many people where one of the core fears is the experience of being seen experiencing fear, whether that's in a professional and or social environment. The idea of being seen experiencing fear triggers all kinds of fear of judgment, fear of humiliation, shame, embarrassment, and more. And this kind of experience can get misclassified a lot as social anxiety or performance anxiety, and it is definitely related, but actually the situation is not the trigger. The fear is of the fear of fear itself in the context of a social situation. It's experiencing fear in a place where that might be perceived and the experience and fear of judgment that comes with that. Essentially, you would be okay experiencing fear at home because no one can see it. It's the fear of experiencing it in a place where people could see it and that would mean something. And the worst thing is about this type of anxiety is that the pressure to not be in fear or to not be seen to be in fear creates more fear and anxiety, which means it's much more likely to happen. So it becomes a vicious looping cycle that can feel really entrapping. So if you experience this, here is why you don't need to worry. First of all, many people who feel this kind of anxiety engage in safety behaviors. They do behaviors to try hide their anxiety and how it's coming across. For example, if my hands are shaking because I don't want people to see I'm in fear, I'll keep them out of eyesight so no one can see them. But actually, there is a lot of research to suggest that the moment you stop doing these behaviors and actually allowed yourself to be seen authentically, that is what increased likability of people. Not hiding anxiety, not being anxious, but just being their true self, even if that meant that they were anxious. And that is backed up by another study that found self-disclosure, including self-disclosure around feelings of anxiety, actually increased the likability of people. So whilst anxiety is telling us anxiety is bad, no one should see it, people won't like you, people will think it's weird, etc., these studies show that authenticity and self-disclosure around anxiety actually increased likability. Essentially, it's safe to show some anxiety. And number two, multiple research suggests that people are prone to something called the illusion of transparency. That is, they believe their thoughts, emotions, and feelings are much more visible to other people than they actually are. The illusion of transparency tricks you into thinking other people can see and feel exactly how you are feeling and thinking, and they cannot. This has been proven many times in research, but is also at the heart of cognitive behavioral therapy for things like social anxiety, performance anxiety, panic attacks, etc. The illusion is the mismatch between what we feel and what people can see. So for example, I might feel right now an 8 out of 10 anxious, but you may only be able to perceive a 2 or a 3. There is often a huge gap in the middle. Because the reality is most people cannot tell the level at which you are feeling something. And I have done hundreds of experiments with my clients in my group class where people speak when anxious, give themselves a rating out of 10 how anxious they were, and other people also give them a rating out of 10, and I am yet to ever see somebody in the audience rate the person as anxious as that person rated themselves. And this is also exacerbated by a feedback loop. The more anxious you feel, the more you monitor yourself, the more you monitor your symptoms, the more anxious you become, the more you think people can see that, therefore the more you monitor, and you get trapped in this loop. And interestingly, in one study, some speakers were told about the illusion of transparency before they were public speaking, compared to a group that was not told about it. And the speakers who were told about it rated their own speeches more positively and expected the audience to rate their speeches more positively compared to the group that weren't told about it. And the reason for this is just simply because they were more relaxed. So even knowing about this illusion can help give you a bit of breathing space. And indeed, it's true, the audience of the informed group who knew about this illusion rated those speeches more positively than the group who were not informed. Because the truth is, people barely perceive what you're feeling. And the moment you can allow that to be true, you can relax yourself, which means it's even less likely you're going to be as anxious, which means it's even less likely that people will perceive things. And number three, let's not lose humanity in all of this research. Most humans, even when you think about yourself, generally perceive some nervousness, some anxiety to come across well. And I'm not talking about a full panic attack or losing control, but an authentic display of anxiety. For example, that speech that you saw that was important and somebody had a croak in their voice, did that come across bad to you, or did it signal how important they thought the event to be? That conference that you went to where that highly qualified speaker suggested they felt the pressure of the moment. Did you think that was humiliating, or did it humanize them a bit? The way you perceive authentic nerves, and by that I mean self-disclosure about authentic anxiety rather than out of control anxiety, which often comes from suppressing nerves, is also the same way people perceive you. So the next time you're speaking, I want you to hold in mind the illusion of transparency. Giving yourself the grace to feel anxiety because 1, it's completely normal, 2, it's not perceived in the way you think it is, and 3, by suppressing or controlling it, it will only exacerbate it. Yes, the first time it will feel vulnerable, it will feel weird, but that is the only way out of this loop. And if you're someone who's thinking, okay, that's great, but I don't want to feel anxious at all, how do I stop the initial anxiety? I get it. But the first step is exiting this loop. You will never not feel anxiety in these situations until you are not afraid of the experience of anxiety itself. Because if you're afraid of the experience of anxiety itself and the perception of that, you will always have anticipatory anxiety, that what if that happens beforehand. And when you have that what if, you are already entering the room in an anxious state, and then it triggers itself because you think people can see it. You have to be okay with the experience of it for it to leave in the long term. You will get there, and I know it sounds so counterintuitive. Remember, anxiety builds on itself, so the moment you can embody these things, you exit that loop, and that will also, over time, not immediately, give you long-term relief. I hope that makes sense, because sometimes it can be a whole new way of thinking and relating to anxiety. Let me know in the comments what you think.